My background is actually a background that I would not have expected to find myself in this work. And I authentically found myself in an unexpected place. And so I am actually a trained anthropologist. And I did my doctoral work in Nairobi, Kenya, among international humanitarians installed in African urban spaces. And I looked at the ways that Western bureaucratic structures of expertise and power produce themselves symbolically through their work, through documentation, conferencing, jargon, luxury consumption, which is often what you find in expatriate communities installed elsewhere. And I looked at the ways that that symbolic production played out in these objects that we consider objective, which are like project plans and national priorities and relationships to sovereignty and financial critical outcomes for nations, right? For communities, for identities, where it's under acknowledged how Western cultural power really compromises the meaningfulness and the impactfulness of those approaches to international development. And I presumed that my follow-up work would be in a liberal arts college or an Ivy League somewhere in the US. And as I was writing the draft back at home, having left home in 2001 and returned in 2011 to tents lining my streets. You mentioned in my bio that I'm a third generation West Oaklander. So Oakland has a really interesting trajectory. And even with my parents being small business owners, I got to be really present in our city, across our city, and watch these things change from being a very bonded community when I was young to moving through the economic shocks of the 90s, as well as living through the crack epidemic that was carried out on our Black communities by our government. We were flooded with guns and drugs in the 90s that destabilized a lot of our liberation movements. Watching my community attempt to recover from that, and then the radical transformation of our economy through the changes in demands for tech labor and land values, and what you see in our cities is a process of reverse urbanization where the underserved were first relegated to the inner urban core as underclass labor, while the suburbs were highly valued and a lot of attention was paid to them. Now, with the shifting of the economy, the urban core has become a highly valued place. And these bodies, these people, these communities, us, you and I, are, unless able to participate as valued producers in this economic transformation, are being once again moved to the less valued spaces. And so, having done world systems and returning to my city, it really stood out to me. At first, the changes stood out to me. And then from doing some organizing around the politics of Black Oaklanders using space, because in the US, it's still a very political act for a Black person, for more than one Black person to congregate in a public space and express anything other than dourness or labor. It's still a political act. So some people might call it Black joy. Unfortunately, it's still a political act. So I was doing a little community participation, just some volunteering around continuing to use space where there's been 3 to 5 generations of Oaklanders. Black Oaklanders first arrived in the Bay Area in the 1940s in response to the need for labor, Oakland becoming a major international port, and huge communities were formed around labor demands, as happens in most cities. And accidentally, I got pulled into a city council campaign realizing that our district, our city was not being well served. And as a field worker and anthropologist, instead of using the received routes to activating people to vote, we chose not to use mailing houses. We chose not to go with the received political approach. We designed all of our material. We went person to person, door to door, and it really drove home to me what a critical and disinvested state we had all come to find ourselves in, right? Depending on corporations to plan our cities, depending on municipalities who are under the thumb of corporations to advocate on our behalf for space, for resources. It was a pretty dire vision I got, despite the fact that we only lost by 1,500 votes against an entrenched incumbent, which we took as a win. What I realized in connecting with more community organizations, that cooperatives were the answer, right? That collective economic action, given when you speak to our city leaders, and in my case, asking them, why does our city look the way it looks? And the response is often, well, it's the free market. We can't do anything about it. So the solution that really clarified for me is, oh, okay, so if it's the free market and we find the means to contest with free market actors, then we also don't need the permission of our cities and our states and our nations to create the reality that we want for ourselves. So my mission was to bring philanthropic dollars to cooperative enterprises. But the way that I could start, the resource I had was myself and the extensive education I was lucky enough to receive, which is not really the case for people who come from West Oakland. If you check a little bit of the history, it has always been a depressed area until the movement of new labor coming into the area and radical and racialized displacement. In volunteering, I came across East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative when it was just an idea, and I thought, like, wow, this is a great idea. This deserves half my time. At the time, I was a librarian, and it was such a beautiful and low-demand job. I had a lot of extra intellectual labor to offer for free. And a year later, I'm the executive director, because it turns out that this was a really impactful project where we could move a lot of people and a lot of resources toward a collective community vision built in us organizing one another, not in us organizing the underserved, but organizing ourselves, built in us learning and gathering the technical skills to understand the functions of the market, and given our desire to redefine how financial tools and financial products can be applied to our situation, and informing and educating our mission-aligned lenders, our impact investors, our well-intentioned municipal leaders, and our neighbors on what the collective mission is that will take us out into the future as a more stabilized community.
Wow, that's a lot.
That's a bit much.
No, it's not.